Welcome to my NimConf talk, Make Beautiful Presentations in Nim using NimiSlides. My name is Hugo Granstrom and I'm the creator of NimiSlides. So, what is NimiSlides? NimiSlides is a Nim library for making presentations. And it's implemented as a nimib theme based on Reveal.js. A nimib is a Nim library made by Pietro Petalongo, which allows you to create Nim content in Nim, and Reveal.js is a HTML framework for making presentations. And NimiSlides is powered by Nim, so it gains all the benefits that you would expect from Nim. It has an elegant DSL-based API, it's easy to use, and it leverages Nim's flexible syntax. So, our goal is to be the easiest way to create a slideshow in Nim about Nim. And it's the about Nim part that's the most important here. So why do we want to use Nim and nimib for this, and not any other library or language? And the first reason is that nimib is customizable. So you can easily extend it, and the most important addition to the new nimib 0.3 release is that you can make custom blocks, which can reuse parts from other already defined blocks, which is very useful when you want to create new blocks, so you don't have to write everything from scratch. And then the output of nimib is HTML. So if you just know what HTML that you want to produce, you can write a piece of Nim code that produces that, and then you have basically made a new block. And also, Nim is very powerful, and the main reason for that is Nim's metaprogramming. And metaprogramming in short is that you can have functions that not only take in variables and values, but it can take in pieces of code as well. And the most easiest example of that is templates, which allows you to insert a piece of code instead of the call to the template. So you can have a template which inserts a much more longer and complex expression, for example. And they can take in code blocks. So you can take in a code block and then copy paste it somewhere inside of that more complex structure, which I will show later. And this is useful because it can simplify repetitive patterns. So if you are writing something a lot of times, and the only thing that changes is a small bit, but the whole thing is quite large, you can use a template to simplify that, so you only have to provide the bit that changes. And then we have macros, which are they are crazy. And they allow you to take in a piece of code, analyze it, modify it, create new code. You can do basically anything with it. It's your imagination that puts the limits here. And then a feature of nimib is that all the code blocks that you run will be compiled and run. So you know that if the document compiles, you know that also all the code blocks in it compiles, which you wouldn't know if you just copy pasted some code into a code block in Markdown, for example. And then nimib can also capture everything that you echo from your code, which can be really useful. And these 2 points in combination will both verify that the code blocks compile, and then if you echo the results, you can also know that they are compiling into the right thing. And then, why would we even want to code a presentation to begin with? And one of the main reasons for that, I'd say, is automation. And one example of that is that you can generate the plots in the code. And this way, you can always know that the plots that you have are up to date. For example, if you have a data file, a CSV, that you generate the plots from. If you ever update the CSV file, the plots will automatically be updated next time you run the document. And then you can also use nim constructs, like for example, if statements, for loops, basically anything, because your document is just a piece of code, so you can treat it as that, and that allows you to automate a bit of tedious stuff that would have been more cumbersome without it. And what we will cover today is that we will first go through the basics of NimiSlides and the Slides API. Then we will explore its features. And lastly, we will go through a couple of practical examples. But let's start with the basics. And to start off, NimiSlides is, as well as Reveal.js, a 2D slideshow. And you can see that by pressing escape. And then you can see the grid of slides we have here. And the way it works is that it starts up in the upper left corner, then goes down the column, and when it reaches the bottom, it goes up to the next column, and so on. And what this allows you to do is to structure your presentation a bit more. Because in this column, I had all the introduction. In this column, I have all the basics. Here I can have everything with code blocks, animating code, typewriter, and so on. So it's not just a linear thing. And then we have Markdown, and this is the main markup language that you will use for text. So this is the main markup language you would use for text. And the way that you do this is by using the nbText template. And as you can see, we can format this as Markdown and do all the usual things. We can see that it produces this code. The header, the text can be italic, bold, crossed over, you can list, and you can have a link. And yes, this is what I would call, or the paradigm that NimiSlides or nimib in general uses, is Markdown in code compared to code in Markdown. And what is this? What you're usually, or many frameworks out there that allows you to combine Markdown and code are Markdown files that you can embed pieces of code in. So, and then it can run the pieces of code for you and show the output. But what they can't allow you to do is to modify and extend the features of that framework easily. But if you have Markdown in code, as we have here, we can use code to create the Markdown, for example, or create any of the blocks. So, in my opinion, Markdown in code is superior to code in Markdown, as it allows you to do a lot more and more easily. And to install NimiSlides, you use Nim's built-in package manager, Nimble. Nimble install NimiSlides, and it will install all the dependencies for you. And then, if you want to use it in a file, you import nimib and NimiSlides, and then you do nb-init and set the theme to reveal theme. And then you will have it set up, basically. And now, for perhaps the hardest part to grasp at first, the slide API. And the NimiSlides uses the same basic layout as Reveal.js does by nesting slides. And depending on how many levels you nest them, you will get either horizontal slides or vertical slides. And we will look at an example here. And we can start off here. Here we just have one level of nesting of the slide template. So it means we'll create horizontal slides. So slide 1 and 2 will be next to each other, as we can see here. And yeah, to put content in a slide, you just add any blocks that you want inside of it. Like here we are adding the text 1 and 2 inside of the slides. And down here we can see that we are nesting 2 levels of slides, and this means that we want to create vertical slides, or a column rather. And we can see that we are creating a column with 3, 4 and 5, which we can see here. And this column is to the right of the other slides we've just created. So we can see this as the top level slide always takes a step to the right, and then if you nest slides inside of it, it will go down. Yes. And then we are creating the slides in here, as we did before. And now let's move on to one of the best features of nimib, code blocks. And what they allow you to do, as I said before, is that they will compile and run and capture the output of your code. Like here we have an example of what it can look like. We define 2 variables, a and b, and then we do a plus b. And then we can see that it also captures the output and shows it to us. And the way we do this is by using the nbcode template. And we give it the code that we want to run, and then it will produce this output for us in the resulting document. But we can do much more than that. We can also animate the code by highlighting lines one by one or multiple ones. And it looks like this. First we highlight line 1, then line 3 and 4, then line 2, and lastly line 3 through 5. We can also see that it captures the output as well here. And the way this works is by using the animate code template. And it works the same as nbcode, except that it accepts which lines to highlight and in which order. And as we can see here, it first highlights line 1, then line 3 to 4, then line 2, and lastly line 3 through 5. And this also works if you have a longer piece of code. It will automatically scroll for you and center the highlighted line for you. The next up we have the Typewriter effect, which was implemented in pure Nim using Nimib's new NBJS API, which is pretty neat. And the way it works is that you give it a piece of text like this. This text will be typed 1 character at a time. And then it will do just that. Print the text 1 character at a time. You can also adjust the speed to be slower or faster. And next up we have Fragments, or you are probably more used to them being called animations in PowerPoint or something. And the way they work, or the most simple example, is the fragment fade-in template, which will fade in the content of it. And in this case, it will first fade in the text first, then it will fade in the text second. And we can see that's exactly what it does. And we can also nest fragments, like in this example. And the way it works is that it will go from the outside and in and do the fragments in order. So it will first grow, and then it will shrink the text. Like this. Grow, and then shrink. And lastly, we have end fragments. And what they allows you to do is to do a fragment of a larger block of code after all the fragments inside of it has been done. So if we have fragment end here and semi-fade out, it will wait for all the fragments inside of it to finish. And when they have done that, this will run and semi-fade out all of that. So let's look at what it looks like. First, we fade in first, and then we fade in second. And now that both of them have been performed, we'll do the semi-fade out, which we can see here. And combining all of these different syntaxes, you can create some pretty complex animations. And then we have incremental lists. And they are your standard lists which appears one item at a time. Like this. And you can nest them and do a lot of things. And as you can see, the current list item is highlighted while all the others are faded out a bit. And this is, in my opinion, pretty neat as it puts highlight on the current item. And the way you do this is by creating either an unordered list or an ordered list. And then you put list items inside of it. And inside the list item, you put the content that you want in that list item. And in this case, we create a list with the first list item being the text first item. Then we do an unordered list again. So this is nested. We create two list items, one with the text one level deeper, and one with the text still deep. And as we can see here, you can also give a fragment to a list item. So in this case, it will highlight current green. And this will override the default animation. And we can see down here that you can also supply it as a sequence and provide multiple ones. And then it will highlight current red here. And we will look what this looks like. It reveals them one at a time. And now highlight current green is green. But as the next step, when this isn't the current fragment anymore, it will turn white. And the same thing for the highlight current red. And yeah. Then we have columns, which is a simple wrapper on top of a CSS grid, which creates equally sized columns for you. And as we can see here, we have a left column, a middle column, and a right column. And the way we can create these are by using, first of all, wrapping everything in a columns, and inside of it you can write all of your columns using the column template. So this will create 3 columns like you saw before, and they have the content that's inside of them. Like this. And yeah, columns wraps everything, then column, column, column. Next up we have math equations. And these are a real pain to do in PowerPoint. So it's nice that you can do them more easily here. And here's an example. E to the pi I equals -1. And the way that you use this is by doing, you have to activate it first. So nb.useLaTeX, and it will activate it. And then you can do in all your nb texts, you can inline the LaTeX using the dollar signs. And in this case, this will be inlined math, like you can see here, and this will be on a standalone line. So this is pretty neat. And the next step we have speaker view and notes. So let's start off with how you can create a speaker note. You create it using the speaker note template, and then you can mark and format the text. And then by pressing S, you can get up the speaker view. It looks like this. And in this box, we have the current slide. Here we have the upcoming slide. Here we have the time. And here we have the speaker notes, which we can see has been formatted according to the markdown with bold and italic. And going one step forward, we can see that the next slide will be about backgrounds, which is very useful. We can also have a few different layouts. For example, wide, which puts the current and upcoming slide equally big and the notes very big. Tall, which is quite similar. And then notes only, if you only want to see the notes. But I like the default one quite well. So let's move on to the backgrounds that you just saw. The NimiSlides allows you to have a few different background options. And the first one is a single color background. In this case, this not very pleasant dark violet. And the way that you do this is by passing a slide options to the slide with the color background set to a valid CSS color. And then you can, as usual, put your content inside of it. Like in this case, we have the color background header. Then we can also have image backgrounds, like in this case when we have the nim crown as the background. And the way we do this is by supplying the slide options again, but with the image background set to the path to the image. And the next up we have the iframe background, which allows you to embed a website in full screen mode. And you can interact with this website as you usually would. Clicking buttons, going to links, and so on. And then you can use the buttons down here to move on. And the way you do this is by, again, slide options, iframe background, and the link to the website you want to visit. And lastly, we have the video background, which allows you to play a raw video file. And then you supply slide options, video background, and a link to the raw video file. But something to note here is that YouTube videos or any other streaming videos should use iframe backgrounds. This is only for cases when you have the actual file. And now, Auto-animate. And what this allows you to do is to do things like the following. You add a piece of text and then everything animates to make room for it. And you might have seen this previously in these slides that I have used them quite a bit. And the way to use these are a bit complicated, but it involves slide options. And you set Auto-animate to true, and then you create an NB text with the text that you want on the first slide, and then you create a new slide with Auto-animate true again, and then you add the piece of text that you want to animate in on the next slide. And then we can do the same here, and it will we add the third list item. And the way it would look is like on this slide basically. We have a first item, then we insert the second one, and the third one, and then I have added a fourth one as well. And the header is also included here. And you can change the order of things as well. So it doesn't have to just be adding one item at a time. You can add multiple ones at a time, and you can also insert them in between other list items. So with a bit of imagination, you can make some pretty cool animations with this. And then we can move on to the footer. And as you might have seen, we have a footer down here. And the way you can create this is by using the footer template. And again, it allows for markdown formatting. As we can see, NimConf 2022 is italic, and we can create a link here in markdown style as well. And then another thing that you might have noticed is that we have the Nim crown up here in the corner. So you can also input corner images up in any of the corners by using the corner image template, providing the link to the image, and then saying which corner you want it to be. And you can choose upper right, lower right, lower left, or upper left. And now let's look at a few practical examples that I talked about before. The first one is the use of templates. And something that you might have noticed is that a few of the template calls are quite verbose, but templates can allow us to simplify them. And here we have an example of using Auto-animate. And we want to use templates to simplify this. And the thing that's the problem here is these lines. They are very verbose, and you have to repeat them a lot of times. So what if we instead did a template for this? And something to note here is that the argument to this slide template is a piece of code, so we can't just use a function because we want to provide a piece of code to it. So this isn't something you can do in any language. And the way we do this is by creating the template slide auto-animate, and it takes as an argument the code body, and we specify it as untyped, and that means that it can be anything, including a block of code. And then the code that we want to insert when we call slide auto-animate is this long verbose piece of code, slide options auto-animate equals to true, and then we want to insert the body that we had as argument inside of this. So anything that we pass to the slide auto-animate template will be inserted here. And the way that we will use this is by doing slide auto-animate and then passing in the body as we would have done previously. And looking at the comparison now, this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looked like with the template. And in my opinion, even if we have a quite long name for the template, you could choose something shorter for yourself if you're using it a lot. I think it still makes a huge difference between this and this. So I'm using templates a lot, and I would encourage you to use them as well to simplify pieces of code that you're writing a lot. And the more complex the expression is, the more benefit you can reap using templates. And now we will look at how we can use loops and generating images in Nim to simplify something. And what we will do is that we will plot a histogram of some Gaussian samples for different number of samples. And this can be done like this. We start off by a for loop for the number of samples, 50, 100, 1000 and 10,000. And for each of these loops, we will create a slide. And we start off with creating a file name that we want to save the image to. We draw n samples. And then we create the plot using ggplot by Vindar and save it to the file name we have decided. Then we create a slide, and as I said, one slide will be created each iteration of the loop because we have put it inside. And the text that we want is a header with the Gauss samples, and would use string interpolation to insert the number of samples into the header. And then we use nbimage to load the image that we have just created. And this looks like this. First we have 50 samples, and it doesn't look too pretty. With 100 samples it's still not pretty, but better. With 1,000 samples it's starting to bunch up to something similar to a Gaussian. And at 10,000 we can see that it starts to really resemble one. And something to keep in mind now is that if we would realize, oh no, the mean of the Gaussian shouldn't have been 0, but 0.5, and the variance shouldn't have been 1, but 0.99. Then we wouldn't have to do much change. We would just have to change these two parameters. And then next time that we run the document, it will generate the new plots for us, which is pretty neat. And you can also imagine that instead of generating the samples ourselves, we have a CSV file or something where we load the data from. And every time that we update the data file, the code will automatically load in the new data and create the plots from that instead. And this is the end of the presentation. Thank you for watching and have a great day.